Now let us going to see about the virtualization types. So as we all know, virtualization is a technology that allows us to use physical hardware more efficiently by creating multiple virtual environments on the same system. So instead of dedicating one physical machine to one operating system or one application, virtualization enables sharing of hardware resources, isolation between users and applications, better utilization of CPU, memory and storage. So based on what is being virtualized. Virtualization is classified into different types. So hardware virtualization. Hardware virtualization is a technique where the physical hardware itself is virtualized. So in this approach, a physical special software called hypervisor is installed. This hypervisor directly interact with the hardware. So multiple virtual machines are created. Each virtual machine runs its own operating system. So each guest OS believes it has its own CPU, memory, disk, and network, even though these resources are shared. So why it is used? To run multiple operating system on one machine, to reduce hardware cost, to improve server utilization. So this type of virtualization is commonly used in cloud data centers. Next we're going to see about the full virtualization. So what is full virtualization? The entire hardware is simulated. So the guest operating system does not need to be modified. The guest OS is completely unaware that it is running in a virtual environment. The hypervisor handles all hardware instructions and translates them for the physical hardware. So the key characteristics of full virtualization is the strong isolation between virtual machines, easy to deploy existing operating system, slight performance overhead due to hardware simulation. So emulation virtualization. The emulation virtualization means the virtual machine completely imitates hardware. The guest OS becomes independent of actual hardware architecture. For example, software designed for one type of processor can run on a different processor using emulation. So the important point is that guest OS does not require modification. Emulation is slower because every instruction must be translated. So this type is mainly used for testing and legacy applications, not for performance critical systems. Para-virtualization. In para-virtualization, hardware is not fully simulated. The guest operating system must be modified. The modified guest OS communicates directly with the hypervisor. Instead of pretending that hardware exists, the OS knows it is virtualized and cooperates with the hypervisor. The advantage is that better performance and reduced overhead, whereas the limitation is requires OS modification. Not all operating systems support it. When it comes to the hardware architecture, so there are several layers: physical hardware layer, hypervisor, virtual machine, guest operating system and applications. So when it comes to physical hardware, it includes CPU, memory, storage, network interfaces. These are all actual resources. As we all know, hypervisor is nothing but which controls access to hardware, allocate resources to each virtual machine and ensures the isolation between virtual machine. So it decides how much CPU a virtual machine gets, how much memory is assigned and how storage is shared. So when it comes to virtual machine, each virtual machine acts as a real computer, has its virtual CPU, memory, disk and network. So virtual machine runs independently. Guest operating system, which is runs inside a virtual machine, it manages applications, uses virtual hardware provided by the hypervisor. Applications run inside the guest OS, perform user tasks and it unaware of the virtualization layer. So how hardware virtualization works? The physical server boots, the hypervisor loads first. The hypervisor accesses CPU virtualization features. Multiple virtual machines are created. Each virtual machine is assigned virtual resources. Guest OS runs inside each virtual machine. So applications runs independently. This process allows safe sharing of hardware. So hardware virtualization pros and cons. So the advantage of hardware virtualization is that multiple OS can run simultaneously. It has strong isolation, efficient resource usage. When it comes to the disadvantages of hardware virtualization, as we all know, there is always advantage as well as disadvantage for the each and everything. So the disadvantage of hardware virtualization is that performance overhead due to virtualization requires high-end hardware and complex setup management. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of hardware virtualization. Like this, we have the OS virtualization. The OS virtualization is nothing but operating system kernel is shared. Application runs in isolated containers. There is no separate guest OS for each application because containers share the same kernel. Because they are lightweight, they start quickly, less memory is used. Likewise, server virtualization. So, server virtualization divides one physical server into multiple virtual servers. Each virtual server has its own OS, has its own applications, works independently. This improves resource utilization, cost efficiency. So, this is all about the types of virtualization. Thank you.